Um,
I'd like to say good morning to everyone who is listening to our recording of today's class. While it's beautiful outside, we are still at war, and we hope and pray that Hashem will kindly and lovingly protect our children who are fighting so valiantly, and we certainly are grateful for their wonderful protection of all of the world's Judaism. We are sponsored today by Rose Charlotte in honor of her 60th wedding anniversary to that cute little guy, Gary. And we want to wish a mazel tov to both Rose and Gary Charlotte on this very amazing number of years together. It's a wonderful thing. And they are two beautiful neshamas who are an asset to our community. And we thank them very much for sponsoring today's class. Today, we are actually going to be talking.
Lori wants to say something.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Lori.
Can I just say something? I read this from Abby Jenkins. Peace over my dead body, says Hamas. Your terms are acceptable, says the IDF. To start this, I wanted to share it. I get such a kick out of it.
That's
okay.
Okay, very good. Okay, so today, this coming Shabbat's Parsha, Hashavua, is the Parsha of Vayigash. And it's the sort of the third Parsha that ends the basic story of Yosef and his brothers. And I wanted to talk to you about this very special trilogy of parshiot about a favored son, jealous brothers, a father who did not understand the consequences of his favoritism, and what we should actually take away from this story. And I believe there is one very, very important thing that we should take away from the story, something that we may not really think about often when we read it. As the Baal Korah chants the words, we learn about all kinds of situations the family goes through. But for me, the most important takeaway from the entire Yosef story is reconciliation with family. And I think that is such a powerful lesson to be learned. So let's talk about what this actually means and what happens throughout the story. First of all, we know that the brothers go down to Egypt at the behest of their father Yaakov because there's a famine. We know that Yosef is the number 2 head of Egypt, and he is in charge of the distribution of food. We know that Yosef has been there for a long time, and he has really been successful in his life down there. He is married. He has 2 children, Manasseh and Ephraim, and he now is faced with these Israelite brothers coming to him, and they don't know who he is. They want food to feed their families and to take back the food to Canaan. So the minute that Yosef sees these boys, these sons of Yaakov, he immediately knows who they are, but they do not know who he is. So what happens toward the end of this story? Yosef is really challenged here as to what he is going to do with these brothers. You would think that he would be angry, he would be revengeful, he would be bitter, he would be upset with them, and he would probably want to do something to harm them for what they did to him. But that is not the case. None of that happens. He turns the entire story around. When he sees his brothers, we know that he, in private, weeps. He has to self-reflect. He has to make decisions about how he's going to present himself and what he's going to do as the 12th brother of this family. So what does Yosef do? He goes and he tests them first. Puts the golden goblet in the sack of Benjamin. Why Benjamin? Benjamin, because Benjamin is his biological brother with his mother, Rachel. The other boys are from other mothers with Yaakov as their father. And he wants to see whether the brothers love Benjamin, even though they are from the same family, the same mother that Yosef is from. He also wants to see whether they have resolved the issue of what happened as a family when he was a child. And he wants to see if they have come around to accept the fact that they're a family rather than individuals. So Yosef, in his speech to them, when he reveals himself, he reassures his brothers that there's no need for recrimination, but there's a need for being united. Minatseach, to be united with, that's the slogan now, Ninatseach, that the people of Israel, Am Yisrael, Ninatseach, should be united. And this is exactly what is said by Yosef. The brothers don't apologize to him. Instead, he, Yosef, reassures them and reaches out to them. We can actually talk if you want to talk about modern psychological terms, what is going on in this particular storyline of reuniting. There's two psychological terms. One is called emotional intelligence, and the other is called reframing. I don't know if you know what those are, but we're going to talk very briefly about them that were really terms brought into the use of psychology in the 20th century. But here in the book of Genesis, Bereshit, we learn from Yosef that he was well ahead of all of the psychologists and psychiatrists. No offense to anyone who's a psychiatrist. But Yosef, the Torah, had a very good handle on what was important in life and what it was that was needed to create the beginnings, the incubation of 12 brothers coming together as a nation. Yosef reveals himself to his brothers with a perfect combination of understanding and sensitivity. The most visible characteristic of his speech is the manner in which he speaks. He doesn't yell. He doesn't point a finger. He continues to talk and talk and talk. As a matter of fact, he talks for 11 uninterrupted pasukim. And after 22 years of not seeing his brothers, he becomes the most mature of all of them. Excuse me. Here in the Parsha, he demonstrates profound emotional intelligence toward his brothers. And Joseph says to his brothers, right as he begins, I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? That's the first thing he starts off with. The importance of his father was tantamount to everything. He wanted to find out whether his father was still alive. He asks his brothers, and then he continues as these brothers are startled by his presence. Then Yosef says to the boys, come closer to me. He wants them to be close, both physically and emotionally. And they do so. They draw close to him because they want to hear what he has to say. They are really quite amazed that he is still alive, and certainly they are profoundly amazed at the position that he holds. So what is it that he actually says to the brothers? Rose, would you like to read the speech that Yosef makes to his brothers? Are you there?
It's on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. And he said, I am your brother Yosef, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do you not be sad, and let it not trouble you that you sold me here? For it was to preserve life that God sent me before you. For already 2 years of famine have passed in the midst of the land, and for another 5 years there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to make for you a remnant in the land, and to preserve it for you for a great deliverance. And now you did not send me here, but God, and he made me a father to Pharaoh, a lord over all his household, and a ruler over the entire land of Egypt. Hasten and go up to my father and say to him, so said your son Yosef, God has made me a lord over the Egyptians. Come down to me and do not tarry, and you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children and your grandchildren and your flocks and your cattle and all that is yours. And I will sustain you there, for there are still 5 years of famine, lest you become impoverished, you and your household and all that is yours. And behold, your eyes see, as well as the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth speaking to you, and you shall tell my father of all my honor in Egypt and all that you have seen, and you shall hasten and bring my father down here.
Okay. Quite a different speech than you would imagine he would, thank you, Rose, that he would say to his brothers on the first meeting after 22 years. And it's quite an amazing speech because it shows wisdom, it shows amazing restraint, and it shows positive and loving outreach to his brothers and, of course, to his father. So he smooths over any rough patches, he erases any stains, he ignores the transgression that was made to him, and he moves on. This is a lesson in emotional intelligence. In addition to that, Yosef's family's conflict up until now has not yet been resolved. And now they can come to a closure of the entire process of the jealousy, the family in conflict, the brothers who are fighting against each other, what to do with Joseph, how Joseph should be handled, why their father has a favorite. All of this can be put to bed because now it has come full circle, and Yosef, in his speech, explains to them the coming future situation of famine, and that he is willing to bring them all down to Egypt, to resettle and relocate them, to watch over them, and to make sure that they are all safe and well fed. So quite a different conclusion than we might expect in conflict amongst brothers. As a matter of fact, it's interesting to note that Bereshit in the Torah opens with conflict between two brothers, Cain and Abel, and throughout the book of Genesis, Bereshit, we learn of brothers and families in many, many situations of conflict and in turmoil with each other. And it seems that in these stories, you either come out a winner or you come out a loser on the stage of history and throughout the Torah. Those who come out the winner are remembered. Those who come out the losers are sometimes pushed aside and not made as special and as important as the winners. So what am I referring to? Well, let's take a look. As I just mentioned, Cain and Abel, Cain v'Hevel, they had a tremendous conflict and one is killed. Yitzhak and Yishmael, we have tremendous conflict there, and we see who comes out the winner. Yaakov and Esav, two brothers with tremendous conflict. And then we have Yosef and his brothers. But the interesting thing is that with Yosef and his brothers, while Genesis opens with the strife between brothers and the murder of a brother, Bereshit concludes its chapters with the reuniting of brothers after much conflict and the reconciliation of the brothers, as opposed to how Bereshit begins. So this is tremendous progress. We go from a savage kind of beginning, a beginning that really doesn't set right. How are brothers being so upset with each other they resort to killing? And we see that this conflict, this kind of jealousy goes throughout the whole book of Bereshit. And we wonder how and what is God trying to teach us here? He's trying to show us the moral development of people as people progress in their involvement with God. And as we mature in our relationship with God, we learn how to sew things back up that are damaged and fix things and repair things that are torn asunder. And so by doing this, as we learn about who we are and what God wants of us, we learn how to be self-aware. That's another psychological term that can be thrown out, but what does it actually mean? We become acquainted with ourselves. We become strengthened over our weaknesses. We internalize emotions that make us up, and we now use all of our intellectual being and our emotional being to do the right thing for not only us, but the people or person that is involved in the situation with us. And we come out much stronger with this self-awareness of who we are and what has to be done in order to make us better people and in order to become greater people to interact with other people that God has created. So what is actually going on in this emotional intelligence that we can talk about? Well, the first thing is self-regulation. Sometimes we need to regulate our own emotions by remaining calm, in a stressful situation, and to see whether it's really important to yell and scream and to reveal our innermost unpleasant emotions, or whether it's really important in our interactions with people to show restraint and to show humility and show kindness, even though we want to yell and scream. So the second thing, and this emotional intelligence that Yosef is so good at this end of story, is that he channels his emotions for a higher purpose. And what's that higher purpose? Is to bring his brothers to do tshuva. What's that tshuva? Is to actually understand what they've done to the family, the fabric of the family, and how they can fix it and do better. It's interesting that God's name is mentioned 4 times in Yosef's speech. And those 4 times are all times where God is doing something to make things better. And we have to emulate God to make things better. The brothers needed to do tshuva, and Yosef was the conduit to help him do things better. So this is another example of how we see the brothers turn and embrace each other, as well as Yosef. And Yosef gets a chance to see how the brothers have changed over these 22 years as Yehuda, the brother offers to be a lifetime slave to Yosef in exchange for letting Binyamin go home to his father. This is huge. This is all a tremendous repair of the family's fabric. The next thing is that Yosef shows tremendous empathy. He understands that it's probably difficult for them to come to him, to come down to ask an Egyptian for food, for sustenance for his family. He understands that, and once he reveals himself, it becomes even harder for them because these are the brothers that hated him for the kinds of dreams he had where he was in charge. He was on top. He was who they were going to bow down to. And while this is self-fulfilling prophecy, he has to understand through his growth in the jail and when he was listening to other people's problems, when he was sitting in jail, he grows and he comes closer to God, and he understands that it's more important to be empathetic than to say, I told you so, I was right, I thought so. These are all things that we ourselves encounter in our relationships with our family members and friends and relatives. And yet Yosef was smart enough to understand that empathy was more important than the satisfaction of his ego. In addition to that, his relationship management of how he was skilled in the use of emotional intelligence in order to build the family back up, to preserve the family, and to improve their relationships. It was very critical for him to do the changing, since he might have felt that he was the one who had caused the whole situation, and he understood it now, and he felt that by his becoming totally aware of what had gone on, and that it was all part of God's plan to bring him down to Egypt for the good of not only Egypt, because he certainly saved Egypt from destruction, but he also saves his brothers and his family. So while he doesn't humiliate his brothers, while he doesn't point fingers, while he doesn't show any recrimination, he chooses words of appeasement. He becomes a diplomat on the scene of both political, social, environmental, emotional situations, and he chooses the family unity as his main goal over fleeting victory of ego and self-satisfaction. I think these are tremendous lessons to be learned for all of us. We're going through times that stress us to the limits. We go through times that cause us to have interactions with maybe friends and family that believe in a different way of thinking. Certainly, if we're here and other people are in America or other parts of the world, they see things differently than we do. And yet, B'nai Yisrael is a family, and we have to see how we can unite each other with each other rather than tear each other apart. And this is very important. And this is the tremendous lesson that Yosef teaches us, because as we leave the book of Bereshit, we leave in a much better place than we did as we started Bereshit. And so we find that every person can look over his own life and examine his or her situation in terms of facing and resolving family crisis or in conflict or issues within the family. And we learn that Yosef gives us the strength and the courage and even the words where he says that God had a plan. And the plan, I understand now, the plan was to be there for my family and not to be divisive. And so I think that when we talk about emotional intelligence, that even though it seems that that's a modern term, it is something that we can embrace as well as the Torah can embrace. And for Yosef to show his brothers that he truly loved them, this is no small or simple feat. This was something that was huge, huge. And sometimes in family conflicts, we have to see the bigger picture of love and family and unity. And Yosef does not cease to surprise us. He does not, and he educates us as to how to handle a difficult situation, especially when you're in charge of that difficult. If you're the parent, if you're the adult in the room, if you're the one who's the mature person in the situation, we have to come into terms with who we are. We have to be self-assured. We have to understand the importance of unity. And Yosef was a positive and inclusive, optimistic person, full of love and full of faith and tremendous strength. And his words reframe the events and by putting them in a positive spin in order so that the brothers would understand what had happened, but in a kinder, gentler way. And Yosef comes out the hero here. And while we thought that maybe at the time when he tells about his dreams and he walks around with his coat of many colors, that he's maybe a spoiled brat, or maybe he's just so unpleasant and obnoxious in his relationship with his brothers, that he turns that all around and he makes it better and he makes it good. And this is the best road to embrace and to take, the best road to take, and is an important road to be on the same derech as God. Because if we behave in a way towards God in a godly way, in a relationship with God of forgiveness and for goodness and for understanding and for love, then God will also behave that way towards us. And I hope that we can take away this special message of these three parshiot in this way and grow from it in our lives. Thank you. Any questions, any comments that you would like to share?
Oh, just another brilliant and insightful shiur.
Beautiful.
Amash?
Rhonda, that was really something, and it leaves me speechless. But I have been faced recently with the question by some people of how to apply what's happening today in our world to this exact story, because there are those who would say that we and our current and our enemy are really family. If you don't say brothers, lots of people call them cousins. And so the question I get is, why not resolve in this pattern? Why not resolve a family quarrel? And I have a hard time with an answer for that.
Well, I'll tell you the answer that I give to people who ask that same question. Sometimes, as I mentioned, there are these two competing sides in Bereshit, Cain v'Hevel, Esav and Yaakov, Ishmael and Yitzhak, and those people that you can see the pattern here. One side is often separated in the annals of history as almost the bad guys, okay, as evil. And if we understand in the Torah that it is a constant struggle against good and evil, then we understand that we are the people who are given the job of bringing godliness into the world and extinguishing evil. And if there's evil, we have to make decisions on what to do. But God clearly in the Torah and in the Tanakh tells us when we become a people, a nation, and we leave Mitzrayim, and we go from being a loosely bound set of relatives with not in our land to becoming a nation in our land, when God brings us to the Jordan River to cross over and take possession of Canaan, what does he tell us? Go in and eradicate, eliminate, destroy evil. That's his message. And if you want to call God whatever you want because of that message, you can. But the fact is, God recognizes there are evil things going on in the world. And he says, you must destroy them, or if you don't, they will be constant thorns in your eyes. Now, I don't know whether any of you have ever had a shot in your eye, but you know that getting a thorn in your eye is very unpleasant. And it's not good.
Painful.
So if you can understand the metaphor here, is that these people have made their choices as evil. And once you are evil, God allows us to take them out. Now, this is not reconciliation between brothers. There's too many centuries of history here where these people are not our family. They didn't stay in the family. They didn't take on godliness. This is not a quarrel amongst family. This is people who have gone off the derech, who have gone in a different direction, who have rejected
Not
God.
now.
They have made their beds, and it is not the bed that God would want them to sleep in. So
You'll have to wait.
this is totally different. And this war is not the war or the conflict between a family, because they're no longer our family. They chose not to be our family when they had opportunity after opportunity to be family. Now we saw when Yaakov and Esav reunite after years of being 20 years of being separated, and Yosef Yaakov says to Yosef, "We can live together in this land. We can be brothers." And what does Esav say? No, this land isn't big enough for both of us. It's not big enough for our sheep to share the land. And if it's not big enough for our sheep, how can it be big enough for us? And he leaves. And he goes to Edom, to Mount Seir. And that's where he starts his nation of people who are not connected with God. And these Edomites are people who we learn about in Sefer Yehoshua and Sefer Shoftim. They are constantly, and even into Malachim. So these are people who are constantly battling against Israel. And they're not family anymore. And the Gazans and the Arabs are no longer family. Ishmael left. He left the family. He was thrown out because he was not going to bring godliness into the world. So this fight of good and evil is not the fight of Yosef and his brothers. It's not related at all. You have to make a distinction. This is totally different. I hope that answers your question.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I get so emotional.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't here to hear the question, but the answer sounds fabulous to me.
Is there, I mean, anyone else is willing to make a comment? I'm happy to hear, questions, comments, but
You're fantastic. What can we say after that?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure all of you have opinions. It may not, maybe they don't agree, we're not in agreement, but you're certainly entitled to have an opinion. And certainly entitled and welcome to share your thoughts that maybe you see it differently.
Lori Abrams had her hand up.
Lori, go ahead.
Getting back to originally what Ellen said about family and all that, and after what you said, I think this also teaches us that everything is timing. Everything is timing. Now, we have to wipe out the theology, the thought process, everything else, and retrain all the children. Otherwise, we aren't family. If we talk of us as the human family, all the nations, which someday when Mashiach comes, we will be a family. But in the meantime, God wants you to be a realist, okay? And to be a realist, you have to fight when you have to fight, and you have to try to make peace when you can make peace, but the timing is very important. And lesson after lesson, we learn that we try to get things smooth too soon, okay? And that's our fault, because time and time again, appeasement doesn't work.
Yeah.
We don't learn the lesson until we're really, really clobbered.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think eventually we will, but it won't be the generation that we just saw that did these terrible things. It'll be their children if they're reoriented. And if they're not, then it's going to have to wait until that happens. But, this has been the story of history, but unfortunately it's been our story, too often. But I think
you're right. You're right. We could take you. You're absolutely right when you said it's our story, our history. Every bit of historical fact about the Jewish nation from the beginning of time shows that there is always someone willing to eradicate a people of moral and
Right.
ethical justice, because humanity is not nice. Anyone who thinks that humans are nice, I have a bridge to sell you.
You have to learn. You have to be taught to be nice.
That's right. Humans are not nice, and they are given the choice of leading a life with the Yetzer Tov on their shoulder and going in the direction of Hashem, of godliness, of justice, of mercy, of strength for God, in the goodness of what life needs to be. Why would God give us so many commandments, so many rules, so many regulations, if he knew that we were going to be a wonderful family like Father Knows Best or Donna Reed or Lee?
Yeah.
If we were all going to be these wonderful families, he wouldn't have had to give us all these rules and regulations. And so consequently, we have to understand through self-awareness that people are not good. And if we can change that about ourselves, about our families, about our communities, about our cities, and like a target, with each ring getting bigger and bigger, then we can have an opportunity to bring holiness into the world. But it has to start with each and every one of us and how we raise our children to be good people, to be kind, and to be God loving. So, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you a personal experience. It's interesting because I have a friend in America, and she and I grew up together. And she said to me when we had children, "Why do you always push the God thing? Why are you always talking about how God this and God that, and the holidays have to be filled with God and righteousness?" She said, "Just why don't you teach your kids how to be good people?" Well,
But where does that start?
Well, there's a difference between just being a good person and whose standard is good. If it's not God's standard, then whose standard?
Each individual, and they all have their own ways.
And so maybe a good person might think if they have no God to answer to or no higher authority, that they may only have to answer to themselves.
That's the problem.
And maybe murder is okay with them and they think they're a good person. So you have to understand that people have to have a higher being to answer to in order to have rules and regulations as to what is good and what is not good. Otherwise, it's hefker. It's anybody can make the rules, anybody can make a decision, and anybody can blame or accuse or recriminate other people because of their own personal standards of what is truth. And we see that right now.
Yes.
We see that in the bullying of people. We see it in the cancel culture, in the woke culture, that they can't even say I as a person. It's a tree, call me tree, because they can't accept responsibility. They cannot accept who they really are. So now I'll be a tree today and a horse tomorrow and a table the next day, and then nobody can blame me for anything because I have no identity. I have no position in this world. and I certainly don't take responsibility. So
But
this is how I see it. And I think that when people talk about this war, you have to, in your own mind, and this is exactly what Joseph did, you have to say to yourself, who is asking or talking to me? Who is this talking to me? Is this a person who is religious? Is it a person of the woke culture? Is it someone to the right, someone to the left, someone to the center? Who is the, you have to identify your audience in order to give them an answer that they can understand. And I'm telling you, this is exactly what Yosef did to his brothers. He saw who his audience was. He saw what had to be done. He saw that it was important for him to become part of his family again. And he saw that it was important to say the things he said in the way he said them, because he wanted to remain part of the family. But he didn't lose his soul over it. He reframed his response. He re-examined what he had to say. And that's what all of us have to do in dialogues with people of differing opinions. Are these people important? Are they part of our family? Can you say to the people, can we love each other and still agree to disagree? Can we do that? Because sometimes we can't. Sometimes somebody's ego has to be on top, and it keeps us from having that kind of relationship that we need to have, a loving, kind, understanding relation, because somebody in that relationship has to be on top, instead of saying, let's do what's good for the whole as opposed for the individual.
Mhm.
thank you.
That's where I see it. Now, the question that begs to be answered is, how does the movie end that we saw 2 weeks ago? And so, ladies, I am going to send you the link so that you can watch the entire Yosef and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat movie, and you can see how it ends. And it ends,
Donny Osmond, yay.
and it ends quite lovely. So
Yeah,
yes, so
Well,
spoiler,
thank you.
I think
spoiler alert.
look at who the hell cares how it ends. It's fine.
Okay, so I hope that you all have a beautiful Shabbat. I hope you're safe. I hope your families are whole. I hope that all of you have strength and courage to talk about this at your Shabbos table. All of you should talk at your Shabbos table about love and what Yosef teaches us throughout his lifetime. And I think
That means I have to invite people to my Shabbat table.
or you can be invited to someone else's and bring it up. So,
Or neither, who knows?
or you can
Thank
talk
you.
to yourself and always be right.
Thank you, Rhonda. Hi, everybody. Have a wonderful Shabbat.
Okay, take care.
Take
Be well,
care. See you next
everybody.
week, please God.
Okay, yes.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye.
Thank you,
Shalom,
Rhonda.
thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom,
Thank you, Rhonda.
everybody.